Good afternoon, everyone. Happy Wednesday to you. Josh of Severe Weather. Appreciate you joining me this afternoon. We continue to monitor an area that is likely going to be our next storm in the Western Caribbean, with the next name on the list being Sara. Now, models are continuing to shift some in how this is going to play out, but it does appear the system is eventually heading for the Gulf of Mexico next week. And those of you in Florida in particular need to be watching this very carefully, as you are in the potential path down the road a week or so from today. But in the shorter term, we do have some adjustments in the forecast that are going to make all the difference into how strong this system could end up being and where it may end up going. And I'm going to talk about those in this video. We continue to have a major threat, especially in Central America and across the Yucatan Peninsula, but also across portions of the eastern Gulf of Mexico, including Florida. Now, my forecast today has changed based on new model data coming in, and this could still change. One thing is for certain. This time of the year, very complex situation with the way storms are tracking farther south across the United States into the Gulf, and that will change the steering up than what we may see during the peak of hurricane season. So what will happen is we are going to see this system develop into a depression or tropical storm, probably either tomorrow night or on Friday. As it does so, it's going to turn west, but will not make landfall just yet. It'll be drifting very close to the border of Honduras and Nicaragua, which is right over here. And until it gets to that point, it can strengthen pretty significantly with very warm water and low wind shear. But the challenge then becomes where the system ends up going and how quickly it moves. We now have models today that are bringing the system just inland over Honduras or scraping the coast, and that will limit how strong it can get. And that also is shifting the track west, and instead of going over the Yucatan Channel, which is still a possibility, but less of a likelihood in today's forecast, this will bring the system more towards Belize and the Yucatan and allow for some weakening. And as a result, it's less likely that this comes out as a hurricane, and especially a stronger hurricane, but it's still possible that it could become a hurricane if this shifts again to the right. So we still haven't learned a whole lot about the system yet, but here was my forecast yesterday, and that was based on a lot of our reliable model guidance. And you'll see today that shift a couple hundred miles to the west has changed the intensity on it. Now, if you're in Florida, this does not mean you are completely off the hook. In fact, this very well could shift back to the right. I've seen that happen a lot. We've seen it happen quite a bit this season. So until the system forms and until we know how it's going to interact with Honduras and Belize, we don't know exactly how strong it's going to end up being. All I can do is make a forecast and then adjust as I find fit needing to do. So here we go. I stumbled over those words, but adjust as I see fit, and that'll be needed to be done more than likely here in the next couple of days. So we continue to have a 90% chance for formation here over the next 7 days. We are probably going to have aircraft going in, showing us whether or not this is, in fact, a tropical depression. They were supposed to fly in this afternoon. That was the original plan, but that flight apparently is not happening until tomorrow morning, so we've got some more suspense here in this situation. But nonetheless, 90% is a high chance, and you'll see water temperatures across the Western Caribbean remain very warm here. Typically, these temperatures are in the lower 80s. They still remain in the middle and maybe even upper 80s, with the highest heat content right about here on the western side of where this system is going to form. Now, as this system heads generally northwest, it still has very warm water to work with until it gets to about this point here, southwest of Florida, and then waters are quite a bit cooler if something comes up in this direction. So we would expect that the system would potentially weaken depending on how fast it moves. Here's a look at our broad circulation. You can see it is actually a growing system here, pretty broad circulation in a favorable area for development. And we may not be far from tropical depression at this point. We do have a frontal boundary that extends in this general direction. You can see that lighting up across the northern Gulf of Mexico, that southeasterly flow, as well as moisture from the remains of Rafael, leading to some instability and some stronger storms across Louisiana this afternoon. But for the most part, this system is going to be in its best position to strengthen right in here. But the challenge is going to be if the system interacts with this land over here. We've seen storms that were very strong make it this way and just flood themselves out and weaken significantly. The one that comes to mind is Hurricane Mitch back in 1998. And I'll show you how that is can be compared to this system. All right, this is our water vapor image. This gives you an idea of moisture in the mid and upper levels. And you can see the Caribbean is very moist. It is dry a little bit more to the north and west of the system, but that dry air is actually retreating, as you can see here. So this tongue of moisture, this envelope of moisture continues to grow, and that is favorable for this system to develop. It's going to take a little time to do that, but looks like we continue to have a pretty good amount of rain and thunderstorm activity. Things have quieted down across Haiti and southern Cuba today, but Jamaica is still dealing with showers and storms. Here's Jamaica right here. This is Haiti right here. Here is Cuba. And these here are the Cayman Islands, Grand Cayman, Little Cayman, and Cayman Brac. You can see for now, the majority of our rain remains well to the south and west of any major land. So that is some good news. And if there were to be a center to form, it could happen somewhere under this canopy of clouds, but it's possible that it's somewhere in here. And as a result, it's not very well aligned. It's not going to strengthen quickly just yet. Over here is the northeast coast of Honduras. This area has been hit by a lot of hurricanes. If you go back to 2020, we had two major ones that hit in this region here and caused all kinds of problems. Those were the Greek letters, by the way, this time of the year, end of October, early November. So this is not an uncommon time for a storm to form. What would be uncommon is if the system heads up into the Gulf of Mexico as a hurricane. That does not happen very often. But you can see here, looking at the European ensembles, the possibility of at least a depression is over 90% across this entire area in red, from just southwest of Jamaica to Central America, the Yucatan, into the southern Gulf, and an 80% chance across southwestern Florida, 70 across the remainder of Florida. So that's the tropical storm potential over the next 10 days. This is the tropical storm potential. So the depression potential higher than the storm, but we still have 80% possibility of something here in the south central and southeastern Gulf, and especially in the Western Caribbean. And then we do have hurricane possibilities, albeit they're smaller, both here in the Western Caribbean as well as off to the west of Florida. So what this means is if you take all the ensembles together, there's two likely areas that this could have hurricane intensity. One would be in here, and then it's possible over the Yucatan, but more likely if this system comes up in this direction, that it could be at hurricane intensity. And the time frame for that, I believe, would be Tuesday night, Wednesday, and maybe very, very early on Thursday. I've seen a lot of folks get excited about the system online and compare it to Wilma, showing an exact track to Wilma. And yesterday's forecast indicated that certainly was the case. Remember, Wilma was a strong Category 5, and then it weakened as it approached the Yucatan and then re-strengthened over the southeastern Gulf. That was a few weeks earlier in the season, but still a late season storm that hit as a major in southwestern Florida. But with what we're seeing in models today, there very well could be a Mitch as well, where this is a strong storm for a while and then drifts south into Honduras. The mountains shredded apart, and then it comes out of the Yucatan much weaker. But that one was a tropical storm that hit southwestern Florida. Now, this will probably not be either type situation, but these are the two storms I do want to at least compare it to because of the forecast track and the upper levels. But we can see here, while the ensembles are not super confident once we get past Monday of next week, there is less spread than usual. So there at least is some sort of an idea of where this is going to end up going. And you can see here, all the ensemble means take this towards the very close to the northeastern tip of Honduras, but never officially making landfall, and then turning northwest and heading up towards the Yucatan Peninsula here, maybe around Tulum, and maybe just south of Cancun and Cozumel, and then eventually turning northeast. And you can see here the greatest support would be for something maybe coming towards Tampa Bay. But again, that's just the ensemble. Now, this has shifted from yesterday. If we go two runs before, we'll see that model average took the system not nearly as close to Honduras, looped it back out, and then pulled it northwest over the western tip of Cuba, and that would have brought it into southwest Florida. Then the run before that, or the run after that, has taken the system farther west, very close to the Yucatan, and turned it more towards maybe Sarasota. And now today's ensembles are farther west, bringing the system onshore the Yucatan, and then coming out near Tampa. Now, this is a blend of every single ensemble. This is, if you take 200 different solutions and try to average them together. Will it happen exactly this way? I'd say probably unlikely. But if we're going to average everything together, that's what we're seeing. So I like to watch the trends. And if this continues trending west, then we will have a weaker system out in here. But if it trends back to the east, then the forecast from yesterday may look more realistic. And I don't know how that's going to play out just yet. All right, so here's a look at some of the ensembles. Here's the European ensemble, and you can see a big shift west here from the European. The stronger solutions are these over here, which barely scrape the Yucatan, and then these are the strongest solutions coming into Florida. But the more common solutions are farther north and west here and are weaker. So now we're talking low-end hurricane or high-end tropical storm. And there are some solutions, believe it or not, up in here that re-strengthen this system and threaten Alabama or Florida. Now, that's not very many solutions. This is an outlier, but at least there's still a possibility of that. So we don't want to totally write it off for this area yet, even though the majority of our guidance brings it into this general area from the Big Bend into Southwest Florida. And that spread, again, is not as big as we've seen for some here over a 7-day stretch. In fact, this is relatively good agreement and pretty high confidence that Florida gets impacted. Now, this is the GFS ensemble, and it looks quite a bit different than the European. You will see here the GFS actually does bring this farther inland, and as a result, it's going to be a weaker system, but we have some solutions here that insist that even if it comes all the way back out over here, it's going to make a very hard right into Southwest Florida. I think it would be weaker at that point, but it's going to take it over the warmest waters of the Gulf and give it a chance to at least re-strengthen. So quite a bit different looking, but this, of course, does not have a threat for those of us north of Tampa Bay over to Louisiana. Here's where our models show it. These are all the tropical models, and you can see more than not bring this either into northeastern Belize or the Yucatan and then pull it northeast towards the Florida Peninsula, the west coast of Florida. These are climatology, so it will not be doing either of these two. And the one extreme outlier right now is the Canadian, which pulls it up towards Destin. But everything is basically Big Bend on down here, all the way into Southwest Florida. Not expecting a direct hit on Cuba, according to these models. And where things are very uncertain is really this piece of the puzzle here between Friday and Sunday, where the storm is going to be lingering and maybe doing a loop or stalled. And stalled hurricanes can sometimes upwell cooler water from underneath if they don't move, and as a result, that would actually cause some weakening, and that could change the landscape of where this system goes. So there's still a lot of unknowns here. I'm not going to pretend to say I know it all. I am making a forecast. I'm putting it out there, but I do know that it's set to somewhat fail in some ways. So let's take a look at intensity. You can see not a lot of confidence on this, but we have more than half of our models indicating that this gets to hurricane intensity here by the time we get to Friday night or Saturday morning. That's in this time frame right here. We have the majority of our models showing a category 1 or 2 storm, some showing a 3, one showing a 4. So I have backed off on the intensity just a tiny bit because of that, but just know that the waters are still warm enough to support a major hurricane, so we certainly cannot rule that out. There would be weakening after Monday as this interacts with Belize or the Yucatan, and then it's spending time over land, looks like Monday night and Tuesday morning before maybe it has a chance to re-strengthen some over the southern Gulf. So taking a look at where the system gets steered here, this is also a confusing part of our forecast. So we've got high pressure building in very quickly here into the western Gulf of Mexico. You can see aloft, we've got high pressure here. We have a strengthening storm that'll move off the Carolina coast on Friday, pretty big trough with it. And that trough is going to try to jerk this back to the right just a little bit. But it's not going to capture the system completely. It just pulls it right a little bit. But after it leaves, it gets stuck down here because the difference today than yesterday is that the high pressure center is a little bit farther south and east than maybe where it was yesterday. It's kind of gone in this direction. And as a result, there's a little bit more northerly pressure on this system to keep it from drifting and pulling itself northward, and it may get stuck for a couple of days. Now, the high is going to lift to the right here, to the south and east. We've got a bigger trough that'll move into Texas next week on Monday and Tuesday. And so after this high shifts east, there's an avenue for this system to come around in this direction. And the strength of this trough is going to determine the eventual path and curve of this system. If the trough is a little quicker, it's going to make a harder right. If it's a little slower, it may try to come up into this general area. It's still Florida, but it's a much different part of Florida, as we all know. Heading beyond this time frame, this is going to be a massive front moving in. So this protects Texas and Louisiana, and this will kick our system out to the east very quickly. It could impact the Bahamas, or it could come close to the southeast coast. And right now, we just don't exactly know how that's going to work out. After this trough lifts out, we will see high pressure eventually building back in to the southern Gulf of Mexico. You can see that here towards Thanksgiving. And the GFS insists that there may be at least one more little piece of energy we need to keep an eye on. But right now, I'm not super worried about that today. Here's the GFS operational. This is the latest run, and it looks a lot different than recent runs. It drifts the system into the northern part of Honduras, then pulls it back out towards Belize. It's much weaker. And then eventually it moves very quickly and merges with our front here Wednesday night, crossing South Florida as a tropical storm. That is quite a bit different than earlier runs, which I'm going to show you here. This is the run from earlier. So look at this difference here. We have almost Category 5 east of Honduras on Sunday morning. That was the run from last night. This morning's run a little weaker, but same general area. And then we've got a rise of 70 millibars in our forecast. I mean, good luck trying to figure that part out. So the GFS could jump back to where it is now, or it could continue this trend, and then those forecasts from earlier are just completely bad. So we're going to have to wait and see on that. But here you can see, here's the GFS. It gets close to hurricane intensity, but it does not strengthen because of that interaction with land. And here it comes moving towards Naples, Florida, as just a tropical storm next Wednesday afternoon or evening. Here's a satellite image from the GFS. You can see it's a big storm, but it's spending so much time near the coast, it just can't strengthen. And as a result, this system's just going to get stuck down in here and get sheared. But take a look at the run before. Just a huge difference. I mean, look at this. This indicates a very powerful hurricane, Category 4 at least. And then eventually it drifts back to the west. So I want to see more consistency before I abandon ship here. But this is obviously better news for those of you in Florida, this later GFS run. Real quick, I'll show it to you again. You can see here Central America, which would get a ton of rain out of this, which would be really bad, by the way, does take one for the team here for the Gulf of Mexico region. And you can see this system will eventually cross near Broward County in Miami here Wednesday night, and it's getting kicked out to sea, and then it's going to be cool and dry for the end of next week. The European, though, has not fully jumped onto that yet. It's a similar track here as the GFS, but instead of going south into Honduras, it never makes landfall there. It just sits on the coast and then turns northwest and moves up to northern Belize here with landfall early Monday morning. After that, we have a weaker system, but it's got a possibility here of trying to re-strengthen in the southern Gulf on Tuesday and approaching hurricane strength as it comes in just north of Tampa Bay, just south of the Big Bend here on the Citrus Coast here on Wednesday. This would be a Category 1 hurricane. So the Europeans not abandoning that chance yet, and neither should we in our forecast. It does not have anything else forming, though, in the Western Caribbean beyond that. Here's a Canadian model. This one is a lot more in line with the GFS. The GFS is actually trended to the Canadian, whereas before the European was. And you can see it's got something coming up to about Destin here Tuesday night as a weaker tropical storm. And then that gets picked up by our front, which would be slower on the Canadian. Here's a look at the Japanese model. And this isn't as high resolution, but you can see it has a near hurricane, and then it turns very close to where the European has it, pulls it up into the southern Gulf, does not re-strengthen the system. Instead, it fades as it merges with a front in the northern Gulf here Wednesday night. The Navy forecast here, Navy GEM, this one is more in line with what yesterday's GFS was showing, or this morning's GFS was showing, and that was a strengthening hurricane in the Northwest Caribbean, hitting Belize and the Yucatan early Monday morning, weakening a little bit and then gaining some strength slowly here on Tuesday and Tuesday night across the northeastern Gulf of Mexico, and landfall in the Big Bend here early in the morning on Wednesday as a hurricane, and then out to sea after that. Here's the HWRF tropical model. This one is indicating this system is going to strengthen very quickly and get stuck northeast of Honduras. So it is in line with the GFS from earlier, showing a powerful hurricane here just northeast of Honduras on Sunday. After that, you can see it turns it to the right. Now, we run out of model after 5 days, but you can see here, if we look at the larger view of it, the parent model here, you can see here that the system is hovering, but it's remaining over warm water, and eventually it's making that turn to the left. And I don't know exactly where it would take it, but I would guess somewhere in here and then up into here, which is in line with earlier GFS runs. Here's the HMON, though. This one's a lot different. It does have a hurricane, but then it draws it southward into Honduras and weakens the system, pulls it back out eventually, but a much weaker system which struggles to regain intensity. It's a tropical storm moving into Belize Monday morning. Here are the two halves models. These are the hurricane assimilation forecast systems here. And you can see we do have a hurricane hitting Honduras or bouncing around on the coast, but eventually weakening in line with the HMON model. And this one comes out near Belize and then moves into the Yucatan here, but it's a tropical storm. And then here's the other halves. And you can see kind of the same thing here. Hurricane hitting the coast Friday night, hovering over eastern and northeast Honduras Saturday, coming back out on Sunday or hugging the coast, and then turning northwest. So in general, This is going to eventually move up into the Yucatan and maybe northern Belize, but it may suffer some consequences of being over land for several days. Real quick, I want to turn your attention to the Western Pacific. We've got several storms going through the Philippines. One hit last week. That is a remnant low. The other one is falling apart here south of Hong Kong. But we do have two very dangerous storms heading for northern parts of the Philippines again. And we have now a super typhoon. This one very quickly strengthened. This time yesterday, it was an 80-mile-per-hour typhoon. Now it's a 150-mile-per-hour super typhoon, peaking at the very worst possible time here for northeastern portions of Luzon. Cagayan would be the province there. And then unfortunately, after that, we have another tropical storm, Manny, which is going to go a little farther south but strengthen and is expected to be a violent typhoon as it approaches the Philippines. Then it does weaken some. But just a very bad situation here for the Philippines. And you can see here, we're up to about 150-mile-per-hour super typhoon, and it's possible it could get just a tiny bit stronger. But landfall will be occurring here by tonight, U.S. time, and here's the track. It may clip southern Taiwan as well, but eventually whatever's left of it heads south and west. Here's the next one, tropical storm, which has passed Guam, and at this point beginning to organize better. Expected to be a stronger typhoon as well, maybe a category 3 or 4. And there's still a chance it could hit exactly the same location as the last two. You can see that on the GFS here. Here's storm 1. Here comes storm 2. Almost the same exact place. This would be Sunday night. And then eventually these two lose steam over cooler water south of China. Here's a European model. And you can see here, this is more of a threat to Taiwan, by the way, tomorrow night and into Friday. And then the next system hits a little farther south, but it's pretty strong as well. That one, though, will get pushed back to the west. So 4 storms hitting the Philippines, 3 of them turning left, 1 of them turning to the right. Just pretty crazy stuff if you think about it. All right, we'll talk about the U.S. for a few minutes here. We've got a decent storm here that's moving through the central part of the country. We've got tropical moisture along a front here, producing some heavy storms over parts of Louisiana and Mississippi. Some of that heavier rain is going to be heading eastward here, but weakening in time. Then we've got another system here, almost a bit of an atmospheric river moving into the northwest. So getting more active here as we head into the middle of the month. Slight risk expected here over the Florida parishes, including New Orleans, including southern Mississippi here, right on into tonight, where there is a 5% or more chance for an isolated tornado and a chance for severe wind all the way up into the Delta region of Mississippi. You'll see here, most of this action is going to be lifting away, but New Orleans will have heavy storms here this afternoon right up to dinner time. And then we're going to see thunderstorms moving through eastern Mississippi into southern Alabama by morning. And we could see some lightning all the way out here into parts of the southeast tomorrow. It's going to be kind of a raw day across the triad. We have kind of a cool air damming situation, but we may have some lightning strikes all the way up into West Virginia and southern Ohio, and in particular across the Midlands of South Carolina and over to about Augusta, Georgia. So a cool stormy day tomorrow. This storm is actually going to crank up more tomorrow night as it moves towards the tidewater, towards the Outer Banks, and a nasty surf expected here across the Outer Banks Thursday night into Friday as this storm strengthens. Here's a look at the GFS for the next 2 weeks. You can see here, not only are we dealing with thunderstorms in this area, but there's a tiny drip here of some blue indicating some frozen or mixed precipitation in the mountains of West Virginia. We could see a little bit of wet snow before this goes over to rain here, and that would be early in the day tomorrow. You can see our storm drops south and east. Unfortunately, it misses the areas that need the most rain: New York City, Boston, Philadelphia. This is mainly a mid-Atlantic and Carolina storm. Here comes the next one in the west, and you will see heavier amounts of snow, especially in the Cascades over the weekend. High pressure builds into the east, so it'll be quiet at the end of the weekend. But next week, we start to see more unsettled weather. One big storm Monday and Tuesday into the Mississippi Valley, and maybe a good snowstorm on the backside of this for Tuesday afternoon and Tuesday night. Possible hurricane hitting Florida, or at least a tropical system. Take a look at this, though. We're going to see major cold coming down. So tropical system here, massive front here, kicking that system out, and then much colder. And you'll need to get your jackets and your coats in Florida here by the end of the week. It'll be a lot colder here. We'll see Great Lakes lake effect snow. We're going to see Appalachian snow here Thursday into Friday, and it stays chilly right on through the weekend here. College football games in the Northeast and Great Lakes will be pretty cold, and then we'll see slow moderation for the week of Thanksgiving. But we could also see an unsettled pattern across the country as well, maybe some winter threats all the way down into the Great Lakes. Here's the temperature forecast, and quite a bit cooler tomorrow. You'll see it's going to be a raw day across Appalachia and the Shenandoah Valley, those areas for tomorrow, warming up across the plains in central Canada. You'll see it'll be milder for Sunday, a pretty mild day. Monday and Tuesday are pretty mild as well, but look at this shock coming for us here. Massive front here, middle of next week. Tropical moisture out ahead of it, Arctic air coming in behind it. It's going to make for some wild weather changes here. And you will see this cooler weather eventually moving into the southeast Thursday and Friday. We may have our first freeze in some areas here south of I-40 by Friday morning. Staying chilly next weekend, moderating a little bit, but Thanksgiving week should still be on the cool side, especially across the eastern United States, while Turkey Day in the west will be a lot milder. So that's all we've got today. A lot to still keep an eye on with this storm. It still has very high potential. Just because the forecast changed today doesn't mean it can't change back. But the trends today are a little bit better for those of us here in South Florida and on the Florida coast. If it does interact more with the Yucatan, that's going to have to weaken our system, and that would not be a bad thing in Florida, but it's not a guarantee just yet. So I appreciate everybody's time. Hope you all have a safe Wednesday evening, and I want to give all the honor and glory to my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. The reason that I do what I do every day here is to be a blessing to other folks and to study the earth that God has given us and has created. Psalm 19, the heavens declare the glory of God. The skies proclaim the work of his hands. Day after day, they pour forth speech. Night after night, they reveal knowledge. They have no speech. They use no words. No sound is heard from them. Yet their voice goes out in all the earth. Their words to the ends of the world. In the heavens, God has pitched a tent for the sun. It is like a bridegroom coming out of his chamber, like a champion rejoicing to run his course. It rises at one end of the heavens and makes its circuit to the other. Nothing is deprived of its warmth. The law of the world, Lord is perfect, refreshing the soul. And the God is perfect. His son Jesus is perfect, but nobody else here is. The good news is that there is the glory of God. The heavens are there waiting for us if we choose to accept Jesus as our Savior. The skies proclaim the work of God's hands, and we've been put here to study what God has created and to be good stewards of the earth. And I feel that is why I do what I do. This is my calling. It is to proclaim that. It is to share the good news, and it's to study what's been put in front of me. I realize that there's a battle between faith and science, but without understanding God, there is no science. And I just want to leave it there for you all today. So I'll be back tomorrow afternoon. Hope everybody has a blessed night. See you soon. Take care.